I wish I had known so long ago why I wanted to do the thing. And I wish that I had figured it out in my 20s or my 30s. If there's something that you want to do, the thing, this big thing that you want to do, maybe it's leave your job, maybe it's double down on your side hustle, maybe it's write the book, maybe it's step on stage, maybe it's become a coach, maybe it's teach a foreign language. I don't know what it is, but there is something that you want to do, and there is something that is driving you and that you know you need to do. And the question, Podsters, is why is this so important to you? And you've heard me say it before, and you'll hear me say it again today. Figuring out that why, what is truly driving you, that's your true north. And that is what is going to get you to do the thing and is to keep you doing the thing when eventually you lose motivation, as all of us do. I take you through my why, my old why, a recent why, a new why. I take you through the exercise and I share with you some stories from some of the women I've been working with that are incredibly powerful. So, Podsters, buckle up. If you want to make a change and you think that this is your time, this is the one thing you have to do before you do anything else. Let's do this.
Are you ready to speak up, stand out, and get your seat at the table? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to Unmute Yourself, the podcast where you'll get real-life anecdotes and actionable tools for you to step into your strengths, debunk imposter syndrome, truly know your worth, and show up like you own the room every time. I'm your host, Nancy Medoff, who did the thing and followed my passion for empowering women like you to unleash that inner spark and become who you know you are meant to be. I'm a diehard foodie with a raging Skittles habit who will not stop until women everywhere unmute themselves and truly thrive at work, at home, or wherever you may be. Let's do this.
Watchers, we are back with a capital B. How is everyone? It is still October. Yep, still October. I am wearing my down vest. If you're watching on YouTube, you will see me in a vest for the next several months. Here in New England, it is cold. And no matter what you do, you can't get the house warm. So here I am, everyone. We have so many cool things coming up in what I was just told is season 4 of Unmute Yourself, the podcast. I can't even believe it. That is wild. So thank you to all of you who share the podcast with your colleagues, with your friends. The notes you send when you post on Instagram about the podcast, it makes my day. So thank you. I did just take a sip of water. Okay. A couple things. First of all, we have a boatload, that is a technical term, of guest speakers coming up. And so this is going to be wild. Y'all are going to be happy. So for those of you who have been here for a while, we have the boundary coach coming back in November. Barb Nangle's coming back. She is going to talk to us about boundaries, and she is amazing. I can't wait to have her back. Anyway, lots of upcoming guests. We are going to do an Ask Me Anything session. I am currently working with the fabulous Jen, my podcast producer, to work out how to get your questions on voicemail. So that's coming up too. So start thinking about what you want to ask me. All right. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about drum roll. Can I get a drum roll? Can you drum roll at home? Maybe drum roll if you're not driving. Okay. We're going to talk about how you know when it's time to go. And this could apply to anything. It could apply to your career. It could apply at home in a relationship. It could apply to a situation. So it's really whatever it is, how you know when it's time to go. You can apply this to whatever situation you're in where maybe you're wondering. The way this came about, I was talking with someone and they were talking about how there's a general feeling of overwhelm right now. And I'm feeling it. I have been feeling it for a while and it's overwhelmed. So you may recall, words matter here on Unmute Yourself, the podcast. And I'm usually very, very adamant that are you overwhelmed or overextended? There's a very big difference. Being overextended will make you feel overwhelmed. You could feel overwhelmed, and that could be due to a number of reasons. I prefer the expression overextended. I can tell you that right now I am overwhelmed. So that's not what we're going to talk about today. as I was thinking about this overwhelm that a lot of people are feeling, I started thinking in my brain, well, why are we doing this? Why are we in these situations where we're feeling like this? And sometimes it's situational, sometimes it's cyclical, whatever the case may be. This got my brain thinking about how to know when it's time to go. So we will be back with an overwhelm episode. However, in the meantime, today we're going to talk about how you know when it's time to go. So here's what I will say. The number one way for you to know when it's time to go is to listen to your instincts. You always know, and you always know. However, if you don't listen to your instincts, or if you can't listen to your instincts, or if you are consciously or unconsciously shutting down your instincts, listen to your family or loved ones, the people who you trust. And I'm not saying that you necessarily even have to go seek their opinion. What I'm saying is, if you are hearing from family members or people who know you and you're hearing things that are making you kind of take pause, listen. Listen to what they're saying. They know you better than anyone. And sometimes they know us better than we know ourselves. I'm going to give you an example. I went to work for a lunatic boss several years ago. I don't even know how this happened. That's a whole nother episode, but I found myself in a situation where it was toxic. It was untenable. It was, wow. It was like another universe. And my stepson, who sometimes listens to this podcast, so thank you. He said to me, really in passing, he said, you're like really stressed out and you're usually not. And my response was, what do you mean I'm stressed out? He said, you're like, you left one job to go to this job. And now you're like, I'm trying to think of exactly what he said to me. He said, you don't seem like yourself. You seem stressed out all the time and you are running all the time. and prior to that, I had excellent work-life blending, because what do we say? It's not a balance, it's a blend. Anyway, and I remember thinking to myself, what does he know, right? Like what he does, whatever. Like, okay, thank you. Because you're in it and you are, you will tell yourself anything. I will talk about myself. I will tell myself anything before I will admit that there's a failure, or that I made a massive mistake, or there was a huge lack of judgment. So listen to your instincts. And if you can't, listen to your family. All right. So that was actually a bonus. That was a bonus, how to know when it's time to go. The real number one here is your workload is untenable and you're not advocating for yourself. So here's what I mean by that. We all have extra things put on our plate. I get that. And there are peaks and valleys with work, with life, whatever the case may be. If we're talking about a career, when it's time to go, your workload is simply not possible. It is not possible to sustain the level of production that you are required to have. And you're not advocating for yourself. So if there's too much on your plate and you speak up and you say, I have too much on my plate, would you like to help me prioritize, or should I do that myself? Or if you have too much on your plate, you could say something like, I'm not able to take that on right now. I can take it on in 4 weeks. Or one of the things I love to say, and I said this to Danny just the other day, I said, I have as much on my plate as I'd like, so that's going to have to wait. I said a little nicer than that. Anyway, so if you are overworked and you're not advocating for yourself, if you're overworked and it just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming, that is a sign that it is time to go. Either you're in the wrong job, or you can't prioritize for whatever reason, or you're afraid to speak up, or you've spoken up and you haven't gotten any relief. There could be, there's so many different scenarios. If it continues to happen and you are not advocating for yourself, it is time to go, period. Because nobody's going to come wave a magic wand and clear your schedule and clear your workload. Okay. The second way to know when it's time to go, and this is definitely for work or for home, you're apathetic or you are not interested, and you're not interested rather, and or you're falling behind. So none of these are good. Apathy for me is when and what I mean by that in this context is you truly don't care. Like whatever, I can take it or leave it. Whatever the decision is, whatever the situation is, yeah, maybe not. There's no interest. So that's a great segue to interested. You're not interested. So let's say you're in a relationship and you're not sure if it's time to go. If you're not interested in doing the activities that you used to do with that person, that's a red flag. If you're not interested in making the relationship better and evolving the relationship, that is a red flag. If you're not interested in talking about the relationship, that is a red flag. Same thing at work. If you're not interested in trying to make the situation at work better, red flag. If you're not interested in your work, red flag. If you're falling behind, it's probably because you're not interested and you don't want to do the work. So that's why I have that falling behind in. So like I said, none of these are good. Definitely a yellow flag. Now, there is, again, it's cyclical. There is, Adam Grant came up with the term languishing. I think it was right after the pandemic, might have been during the pandemic. And I like that term. It's just when you're kind of like, when you're just languishing, you're just kind of like lolling about. That's okay. If it's happening for longer than you can understand or longer than you would like, that is a red flag. I'm going to share another story with you. I was, or for several weeks, I already mentioned that I'm pretty overwhelmed at the moment. For several weeks, I've just been totally out of, a little bit scattered is what I would say. Things are slipping. It's not great. And I'm on the rise. I'm on the mend. I'm coming out. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to wait to talk about this universal feeling of overwhelm. I want to wait until I'm on the other side of it so I can give you some more anecdotes. Anyway, so I had been whining, if you will, or saying I thought I was communicating with Danny, my husband. And I had been saying, I just can't get ahead. I feel like I'm behind every day. I can't, I don't want to live like this, all of these things, which is a horrible feeling. And he's awesome. He is a solution person. He immediately wants to come up with a solution. So I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. Again, he is always there for me, my rock. And he said, you've been saying this for a while, and I don't know what you need to do, but you need to do what you need to do to get over it. and I was kind of stunned, and I was very taken aback. And he said, "You've been saying this for weeks. There's nothing more I can do." And he was a little bit nicer than that. He was clearly frustrated, and I get it. He said, "I don't know if you need to meditate. I don't know if you need to do more yoga. I have done everything that I can. I keep asking you how I can help." And I do, I do ask for help. He's great about that. And I'll say, well, if you could do this, it would be great. But he said, this has been going on for weeks and you need to fix it. And I was very, very stunned. And it was exactly what I needed to hear. It was like when your biggest cheerleader says, yeah, deal with it. In my opinion, it's gone on for too long. I had pushed the limits as much as I could. And he was frustrated because he couldn't help. He saw me in pain and me frustrated. And he's just like, I don't know what to tell you. You fix it. So, woo, okay. So I did. Anyway, or I am. And actually, frankly, that was what I needed. I needed that little kick. I needed that little listen. I've heard you talking about this for weeks. Fix it. This is one of the many reasons why I love him. Anyway, which is ironic given that he was telling me to get over it. That's a whole nother story. Okay, so the third way to know when it's time to go, and this is, I might get emotional. This is when you feel yourself changing. And this could be in a job, it could be in a relationship. This applies to a lot of things. When you feel yourself changing and it's not for the better, and you know you. No one knows you better than you. And there's a difference between being burnt out, being stressed out, and overwhelmed. There's a difference between that and feeling yourself changing. And I would suggest that if you allow yourself to be in that frame of mind for enough time, you will change. And here's what I mean. If you find yourself, let's say it's a relationship, you find yourself feeling jealous, you find yourself being cranky or shrill or short tempered. If you are at work and you are behaving in a way that is not you, you feel yourself changing, it's for the better. I'm sorry, it's not for the better. And that is a very scary place to be. That also happened to me with the same lunatic boss that I work for. And I remember thinking to myself, this is not who I am. This is not who I am. And it is a terrible feeling. And I don't wish that on anyone. So what I would say to that is when you feel yourself changing, it's time to make the change before it changes you. And that was actually, I did not make up that expression. That was shared to me or with me and my class when I was teaching at Boston University. I had a guest speaker and I'll never forget it. He said, make the change before it changes you, because it will change you. It will. So on that note, we talked about how do you know when it's time to go? And I would never leave you high and dry, Podsters. Never. You know that. You know that. So let's talk about what do you do? Okay. I'm going to quickly go through 3 suggestions for when you do know it's time to go. First is, I would say celebrate. Okay. The fact that, okay, now you know. Now you know. Now you know it's time to go. You know what's happening. You have declared it. You have owned it. You are in it, and great. So when I say celebrate, I mean relax and give yourself some grace. Okay. I don't mean, go have a whatever party. I mean, you recognize your self-awareness that you know that you're at the point, and that's great because the next thing after that is action. So give yourself some grace, because by the time you're in it, you're so far in it, you feel like you can't get out of it. You can, and you're about to, if you're having this conversation with yourself. And remember that everything is temporary. Everything. The good times are temporary. The bad times are temporary. So the good times are temporary. Enjoy them while you're in them. The bad times are temporary. It's okay. Understand it's not always going to be like this. This too shall pass. So that's number 1. Relax, give yourself some grace, and celebrate the fact that you now know it's time to go. 2, I want you to think about your choices. I don't want you to make any choices. Think about them. Think about your choices. You always have a choice. I don't care how stuck you are. You may not like the choices that are in front of you. And the choices in front of you might be the least bad outcome, right? So that's when you don't like any of the choices, but you have to pick one of them. So let's pick the one that's the least worse. Not fun. Again, the reality is you have choices. And if you are listening to this podcast, you are in a country where you are free to listen to this podcast. Side note, by the way, shout out 60 countries we are in now, Podsters. I can't believe it. I giggle. 60 countries. I don't even recognize some of these countries. So for those of us outside the US, I love you. Please keep listening. Keep sharing the podcast. It brings me so much joy to know that this message is reaching 60 countries and growing. Anyway, so if you're in a country, if you're listening to this podcast, you have choices. You have choices. So just start to think about your choices. I'm not telling you to make them yet. Just start to think about them, because when you start thinking about these choices, you will activate your brain to gravitate towards those choices and to think less about being stuck, because now you know you're not stuck. Okay. So that's number 2. And the third, it's pretty simple. It's phone a friend. Talk to a trusted advisor. Talk to someone who knows you. Your board of directors is great here. A mentor, a partner, a friend. I remember I was on a plane coming back from Hong Kong several years ago. I talked to a stranger on the plane. I talked to a complete stranger. Don't you love those moments where I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Podsters. If it has, shoot me a note. Let me know. You meet a random stranger and you have these real, vulnerable, like crazy conversations. And then you never see that person again. I love that. I just love that stuff. Anyway, talk to someone. Phone, like I said, talking it through. And this is difficult for me. Admitting that I'm not in a good place is really, really hard for me. And it's really hard for a lot of us. And you cannot walk around with such an unrealistic expectation on yourself. We all have days, weeks, months, seasons where we are not our best selves. It's part of life. So if you can admit that and talk to a friend or a loved one, that you never know where your golden nugget of advice is going to come from, and you will feel so much better talking about it. So much better. So, Podsters, that's my message this week. It's how to know when it's time to go. 1, your workload's untenable, and this is over a long period of time. 2, you're not interested, not engaged, falling behind, apathetic. 3, when you feel yourself changing. That's how you know. And here's what to do. 1, give yourself some grace. Grace always wins over here. 2, think about your choices. Just start thinking about them. And 3, talk to someone. Talk to someone who knows you and somebody who cares about you, because that's going to make a huge, huge, huge difference. All right, Podsters, that's it for today. So, as I mentioned, lots of guests coming up. Lots of fun. I love November and December. I am re-energized. I want to be in 75 countries by the end of the year. Where did that come from? I do not know. So I have 8 weeks to add 15 countries to the list. So help me out, Podsters. Take a snapshot of this podcast recording, throw it up on the socials, tell a friend. I don't know, however you communicate with people, especially somebody from outside the US. 75, that's our goal, Podsters. All right, so I love you. I can't wait to talk to you next week. I can't wait for the Q&A session. And until then, peace out, Podsters.
That's a wrap, Podsters. And before we go, I ask you, what's one thing from today's episode that you will use this week to unmute yourself? DM me, email me, send a smoke signal, whatever you need to do. Let me know what you're going to do differently. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know and leave a 5-star review on Apple. This helps me spread our message of empowerment to more people worldwide. Let's do this.